country shop. Bygones tell their own stories of Irish heritage and how life was lived in rural Ireland in the latter half of the 20th century. Country shops long ago were the lifeblood of all rural communities. Country people were mostly self-sufficient, but they still required some extra provisions to survive. Country shops were dotted throughout the townlands and had a brisk trade daily. In towns and villages, there were larger merchants where you could buy anything, but the country shops stocked the everyday and emergency essentials. The rural country shop was an important part of the social fabric of the countryside. Few women worked outside the home, and a trip to the local shop might be the only contact outside the house for weeks for them. They went not just for supplies, but for social gatherings and the local news of the community. Here is where a real art of conversation was developed, when people talked and chatted about everyday life. Here is where the good news and bad was shared. There was fun and serious talk, and neighbours enjoyed each other and their meetings in the small shop. Most country shops were family-owned and run and were usually a part of the family home, usually one room. They rarely had a name over their door. There was always a counter. The shopper handed their list to the shopkeeper, who in turn weighed, measured and wrapped each item. Everything in the room was on shelves which were around the walls and inside of the counter. No self-service like there is today. A typical country shop would sell the basics of tea, butter, sugar, bread, salt, bacon, eggs, tobacco, sweets, flour, and other essentials. Bigger items were got by country people when they visited the larger villages and towns on fair days or at Christmas. Every country shop had a weigh-in scales with a variety of weights for balancing to make sure that proper portions were sold. Most items were wrapped up in brown paper and tied with string to keep them cool and fresh until they reached their destination. Those same paper bags were kept safe for use in the home, especially to place over liniment when rubbed into the chest as a cure for the cold and flu. Sugar came in large jute bags and was weighed out using the shop scale into thick brown paper bags. Tea came in chests, and it too was measured and weighed on the scales. The empty tea chests were always in demand, where they were used in the home for keeping the growing chickens, goslings, turkeys, the pet pig, and even for keeping the baby and toddler safe. Tobacco came in large blocks and was sold by the ounce or proportion of an ounce. All pipe smokers had a penknife for cutting their tobacco, and many had the habit of chewing tobacco. This was not ingested. Bendigo, St. Bruno Flake and Condor Plug were amongst the most common brands. The John Player, Sweet Afton and Woodbines were common names of cigarettes sold. Many old people, both men and women, used snuff from the country shop. Taking snuff was an old custom at Irish wakes. Later, tobacco came in loose form, and people usually had a little tin to hold the loose tobacco, and usually the tin was for the brand they smoked. Country shops were the main source of credit and survival for local people, and most had lines of credit with all their customers. People would pay a portion of their bill whenever they were able to do so, or when they sold pigs, cattle or other farm produce. It was also not uncommon for the whole family to be getting credit on the one account, and most bills would run for years. Such was the trust and connection between rural dwellers then. It was often the case that some people would do work for the shopkeeper to offset payment against larger bills. It was not uncommon for eggs, hens, or even a pig to be used as an offset for the larger bills. It was usual then for the pig to be killed and sold in the shop. Other items used to offset payment would be bags of potatoes, vegetables, oatmeal freshly ground from the local mill, milk, eggs, butter and turf. Local children enjoyed their social gatherings at the local shop, either on the way to school or on the way home to buy some penny sweets. Sweets were sold by weight, wrapped in brown paper, tied up with string. That was if they weren't eaten as soon as bought. Sweets came in 10 gallons and were displayed on the shelf in a large glass jar with a lid. There were boiled sweets, barley sugar, gobstoppers, bullseye to name but a few. The 10 gallons had many uses in households and would be booked from the shopkeeper weeks in advance of being empty. A most popular sweet in the 1950s were the silver mints or the threepenny mints. They are still a favourite today and cost a lot more than threepence. There were luxury items sold in the country shop for special occasions such as custard cream biscuits, batch loaves, Bo Peep marmalade, black treacle and Ireland coffee. The local shop sold soaps and laundry powders. Sunlight and carbolic soaps were the usual, and in more modern times so was Daz, Tide Omo and Lux for washing clothes as well as boot and shoe polish. The local shop also catered for minor ailments such as coughs, fevers, cuts, stomach upsets and constipation, etc. There was always a supply of Aspro, Mrs. Cullen's powders, castor oil, Andrew's liver salts, milk of magnesia, gripe water, and of course the cure for all ills was Lucozade with the deep yellow cellophane paper on the bottles. The sun was always shining when you looked through the cellophane. Wax candles and paraffin oil were the weekly list for most of the country shop customers to keep their homes lit in the dark, and of course a box of friendly matches to light the fire. The country shop was what kept rural communities going, and without it, the rural communities, the country shop would never have existed. Much has changed in Drumsna and its surrounding community in the past 50 or 60 years. In 1965, grocery shopping changed forever with the arrival of the first supermarket. The glamour of self-service shops meant that hundreds of families around the country would lose their livelihoods to the big supermarkets and eventually to online shopping. Ironically, the first thing to go was the counter and the shopping list, and with them the small country shop. Small country shops have disappeared, as well as many rural pubs, small creameries, forges and post offices. They were the central pillars upon which the survival of rural culture and heritage were based. I don't believe our future generations will have the experience of the small rural shop, as it is a part of our culture that is gone forever. Several generations of my family ran a country shop that was part of our rural heritage for years, and the world is a much changed place to what it was when my grandmother had her country shop in Listrum Ray many years ago.